So I saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a few days ago, and you have no idea how happy I am to say that it was a really good movie. Probably the best Marvel film since No Way Home graced our screens over a year ago, and with an amazing balance of classic Marvel comedy interspersed with some really hard-hitting scenes delving into the past of a character who, until this movie, was nothing more than a background goofball of a character. And all this being accompanied with some of the best tracks from James Gunn's seemingly endless Spotify playlist. Now, before I say any more, I must give the obligatory full spoiler warning. Even though I waited absolutely forever and this movie is probably already out on all streaming services and Blu-ray, I really don't want to rob you of the full experience of seeing this film live. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, but just want to find out if it's worth your money, then I can wholeheartedly say, yes it is. Go watch it whenever you can, then come right back here. And also, maybe consider subscribing along the way. Sorry, it's the YouTube stuff. I need to do this if I ever hope of making money on this channel one day. So without further ado, let us dive into the plot. The movie opens with the first of its many emotional flashbacks into Rocket's past, showing him being taken from a cage of adorable baby raccoons by this depraved individual, a guy known only as the High Evolutionary. A man obsessed with creating the perfect society and species to inhabit it, by any, and I mean any, means necessary. As the camera zooms in on one particular raccoon cub, the scene transitions to the face of the Rocket we all know and love. We then follow him through the streets of the Guardians' new headquarters on Nowhere, the big space head that seems to plague the Guardians like an evil spirit. Now, before we move on with this scene, I feel like it is important to state that if you haven't caught on already, this is basically Rocket's movie. He's the driving force of the entire plot, and his character really benefits from this. If you're familiar with the show Stranger Things, then you should know what happened with the character of Max in its 4th season. A B-grade character made into a fan-favourite main by fleshing out their character more, combined with some sick 80s tracks. Hey, if it ain't broke, I guess. Anyway, Rocket eventually passes by every member of the now huge Guardians cast, eventually leading him to a very drunk Mario, who just can't move on from the fact that his old girlfriend is dead, and the new one, who is also the same one, just isn't interested in him. So then Gold Homelander attacks, destroying some stuff, injuring many members of the Guardians, including Rocket, before getting stabbed by Nebula and retreating into his very forgettable B-plot. The pain and suffering has only just begun, however, as it turns out Rocket cannot be healed due to the modifications made to his body, including something that would kill him. So, to save his life, the gang needs to get a MacGuffin, in the form of the original template used to make Rocket, located in this big space tumour. While all this exposition is getting dumped on us, we get yet another flashback to the cute little baby Rocket Raccoon, getting some, quite frankly, extremely brutal cybernetics from the High Evolutionary, who from now on I'll be calling Perturabo. That's not his name, but he reminds me of him. Also, it's easier to say. So, Perturabo takes this bionic mutant raccoon and throws him into a cage filled with some of the most innocent abominations you've ever seen, consisting of an otter with robo-arms, a walrus fitted with back wheels, and the hardest hitting, for me at least, a truly horrific-looking rabbit with long metallic spider legs and a strange apparatus covering the mouth. As a rabbit owner myself, yeah, this one cut deep. In spite of the freakish natures of these creatures, they manage to comfort the understandably terrified raccoon, giving us this strangely bittersweet scene. Also, all these animals can talk, just FYI. So anyway, cutting back to the present, we hear that without the code, Rocket has around 48 hours to live at most. So it's off to the aforementioned space tumor, where the Guardians run into Gamora and the Ravagers, who promptly give the Guardians some Among Us spacesuits to get them onto the Flesh Station. We once again get a flashback scene showing a slightly older but still extremely young Rocket playing with his animal compadres, before getting taken away by Perturabo to hear his plans for a new world, and we see the unfortunate attempts at creating something to live on it. You see, Perturabo is ultra-evolving various, usually extremely cute animals to use as his new world citizens. Unfortunately, his process turns them insane and rabid, as it would. Rocket, however, interjects as he has a solution in reducing some chemical or whatever to help them. And just before the flashback ends, we see Rocket swipe a few small pieces of tech that end up coming back into play later. This also sets up the main conflict between the High Evolutionary and Rocket, as the High Evolutionary can't really bear that there can be something else out there more intelligent than him. Returning once again to the present, Star-Lord, Gamora, Mantis, Drax and Nebula have cut through the biomass wall, but due to a mistake on Mantis' part, they end up flushing their imposter suits into space. And you're saying this isn't a reference, Mr. Gunn? The gang then splits up with Emmett, Gal from Fortnite and Amy Pond to go off to get the MacGuffin, and the two comic relief characters set out to find another way off the massive cosmic tumour. The gang eventually get everything they need, a hostage situation happens, a fight ensues, Drax gets injured but don't worry, he's fine, and they all get back on their ship and fly away, only to realise that the code they need isn't in what they stole. Instead learning that it was downloaded into the head of one of Perturabo's Iron Warriors as a precaution. So now we have a new MacGuffin. Yay! But it's basically the same old MacGuffin. So we need to head off again to a new location. But you know what's first? That's right, it's another flashback. Rocket is telling everyone about what he saw through Perturabo's window, describing the sky and the ships he saw rocketing off into them. And it's here that the cute abominations decide to name themselves. The walrus designates himself Teefs. The rabbit becomes known as simply Floor. The otter makes a slightly smarter choice of name in Lila. And finally, Rocket chooses, well, Rocket. Perturabo comes back, but this time he's mad. Rocket's suggestion had worked. The High Evolutionary's machines now function properly, creating peaceful, fully organic humanoid animals. But Perturabo wants to know how such an inferior abomination could come up with something like this. So he wants to scoop out Rocket's brain and incinerate the rest of the animals. Hey, we're in the present again, and on a planet simply called Counter-Earth, which is completely inhabited by Perturabo's humanoids. It's basically Earth, but now everyone is now just a little bit furry in places, along with speaking in a strange language that is unknown even to the translators the characters canonically have implanted in their necks. In spite of this language barrier, the gang gets invited into the home of one of the creatures. We spend a considerable amount of time with them, but it's not too important to the plot, so I'll just leave it out. But one thing they glean from this encounter is learning the location of Perturabo's headquarters, along with the MacGuffin henchmen that they're after. Star-Lord, Nebula and Groot then convince the mutant family to let them take their car to the villain's lair, while the comic relief, along with Gamora, are left to guard the ship and Rocket. It's also in this scene that we get Marvel's very first F-bomb.
Get that in!
Okay. Now what?
Open the door!
Just FYI. And it's beautifully integrated, let me just say. On the way to Perturabo's HQ, we get some more shots at the people of Counter-Earth. And we see that it's not quite the surface level utopia that it's made out to be. There is a full daylight mugging, as well as some animals breaking bad, if you catch my drift. Selling meth. They're selling meth. They are selling meth in an alley. Yeah, if you're thinking about taking your kids to see this movie, maybe let them grow up a little bit, and they'll certainly have questions. So the three Guardians finally get to their destination, and it turns out Perturabo was fully expecting their arrival, and lets Starman and the Iron Giant in carefree. Nebula, however, has to wait outside, as she has a cybernetic, everything that could easily double as a weapon. So while Star-Lord and Groot wait for Perturabo to finish typing up whatever he's typing, we get the last flashback of the film. Rocket gets roughly thrown back into the cage with Floor, Teefs, and Lila, quickly informing them that they are not, in fact, due for this new world Perturabo is cooking up. Instead, that they were nothing but experiments, a means to an end, and because of Rocket, their lives are now worth nothing. Luckily though, Rocket has a plan, gathering up all the tech he has purloined over the months or years he spent there. He builds a keycard that blows open the locks in the cages in seconds. And it seems that in the darkness there is a glimmer of light. A shot at freedom as Rocket and Lila embrace freely for the first time ever. A single shot cracks through this happy scene. Lila falls over sideways, revealing the monster who just mercilessly disposed of one of the only things in Rocket's life that he actually cared about. Lila's last gasping words as she stares blankly at the ceiling are simply, "Sky." A furious Rocket then leaps at his creator, screaming with pain as he attacks, clawing, biting, and mauling the face of his creator, torturer, and murderer of his friend, before grabbing the gun he was holding and using it to dispatch the henchmen of Perturabo that were quickly responding to the commotion. While Rocket does manage to take them down, he then looks backwards to see that both Teefs and Floor, who had begun to make their own escape efforts, had been killed in the fire from the troops. With nothing left, a grief-stricken Rocket makes a mad dash for the hangar of the High Evolutionary's base, firing off shots randomly at soldiers, taking cover, and then finally running into a ship and blasting off into the endless sky, alone. Turning back to the present for the final time, Perturabo is finally finished being coy and addresses his visitors. They talk a bit about Rocket and how flawed his new world is, and upon hearing about the corruption in his society below, Perturabo decides that the most reasonable action he can take is to blow the planet up. So he starts to blow up the planet. At the same time, Drax and Mantis, who just so happened to steal a motorbike earlier, catch up with Nebula outside Perturabo's massive sex pyramid. That's not in the script. I don't know why I said that. That's staying in. I don't care. This is staying in too. And the three of them decide to rescue their friends from Perturabo's Pyramid of Power. Quill and Groot, however, have different plans, which involved Groot bringing out all the weapons in the world that he hid inside himself back at the suburban house. Nice use of Chekhov's gun there, Mr. Gunn. And they kill basically everyone, grab Mr. Iron Brain, and jump out the window. Groot then decides to fully embrace his Fortnite counterpart by deploying his glider and dropping onto the ground below as demonstrated here. They land, killing their iron-headed hostage and taking what they needed. They survive the collapsing planet only because Gamora luckily decided to stay on the ship. Perturabo's pyramid is now flying away from the planet. Yes, it can deal with it. With Karen, Dave, and Pom desperately scrabbling to get inside before they suffocate. Don't worry, they all live. Getting inside the pyramid and finding a bunch of children in cages. You know, if you didn't quite get the message yet that High Evolutionary is, evil. Aboard the Not Milano, Peter plugs the firmware into the computer, but it's seemingly not quite fast enough, and Rocket begins to slip away. Arriving in a strange white void, Rocket is greeted by some old friends, Lila, Floor, and Teefs. Yes, this scene made me tear up a bit. He apologises for what happened to them and asks if he can come with them. On the mortal plane, Rocket flatlines. Quill desperately tries to revive his best friend. Lila assures Rocket that he will be able to fly away with them into the forever and beautiful sky. Just not quite yet. Rocket wakes up, gasping and coughing, and right when everything seems right, a radio call reminds you that half of the Guardians are still on the enemy ship, with hundreds of children. They're both here where the other is, and there's a mixed feeling of joy that the others survived the collapsing planet, but are separated in a great mix-up. But after everyone hears that Rocket is safe, everyone is finally united. Before Perturabo interrupts everything, capturing the trio aboard his ship and throwing them into a pit full of the things from the start of the last Guardians film. And the whole time enraging Rocket with his mere existence. So the obvious action here is to go to war. The director's brother is contacted and sails nowhere right through the warp to the Guardian's position. Meanwhile, on the bridge of Perturabo's space pyramid, there is a bit of a panic going on. Everyone feels like things have escalated beyond any of their control. What with the whole planetary genocide and the, skull of a long-dead god with a cannon sticking out of one of its eyes aimed directly at them. It's understandable tensions would be a bit high with that, but yep. Everyone feels like things have escalated beyond their controls. Perturabo fully lives up to the name I assigned him, expounding...
There is no God! That's why I stepped in!
Thor would like a word, please. And a mini mutiny goes down. Perturabo, however, being an ultra-psychic, blows up the entire bridge. Did I mention he was an ultra-psychic? He's an ultra-psychic. Nowhere then blows a hole in the side of the ship with the cannon it had in its eye, and proceeds to dock with the pyramid. Then, an amazing single-shot fight scene goes on, with a bunch of the Guardians taking part that I won't spoil for you here. I will allow you to watch it whenever you can. It's probably on YouTube somewhere, but trust me, this thing is worth seeing rather than me explaining. Mantis managed to control the beasts that were supposed to eat them, taking them on a rampage through the pyramid, and Rocket heads off for some sweet, sweet revenge. A rescue operation to save all the children gets underway, with a psychic space dog holding the two ships safely together. Rocket manages to stumble upon the animal cages that he was taken from at the very beginning of the film, and seeing the brethren that he was originally taken from, reading the names next to the cage of his species, and knowing that he is, after all, indeed, a raccoon. And in a beautiful, heart-wrenching scene, Rocket pulls out the same key card he used to free himself and doom his friends. The cluster of raccoons eagerly gathers around him before Perturabo shows up.
Hello, this is the editing cactus. In the original audio, I said he tried to make peace with him. Reviewing the footage, clearly not the case. He's attacking him.
Rocket instead gives this awesome line in response.
The name's Rocket. Rocket Raccoon.
Blowing Perturabo off his feet, where the entire entourage of the Guardians beat him up and gather around his prone, but still conscious, figure. They peel off the mask that is the face Rocket mauled in his rage all those years ago. It reveals a face that's a sort of combination of Two-Face and Red Skull. Not pretty at all. I'm not entirely sure why they pulled his mask off, but it looks pretty cool. The group is about to get off the ship once and for all, but is halted by Rocket's insistence that the rest of the animals be saved. So the rest of the animals are saved, all running onto nowhere along with the rest of the Guardians. However, Peter gets held up through making the simple mistake of dropping his Zune and going back to pick it up. The psychic dog doesn't have the strength to keep holding the ships together, and Nowhere breaks away. Quill attempts to jump the gap, grabbing a pipe of compressed air to give himself an extra boost through space, but it just isn't enough. There's too much debris between him and the rapidly disappearing celestial skull. Quill's body, without any of his celestial power or his iconic mask, quickly begins to succumb to the deadly vacuum of space, his face swelling up, his body rapidly freezing in temperatures far exceeding sub-zero. All is lost as the first founding Guardian is left to die in space, the same as Yondu, in a beautifully poetic way. And then Adam Warlock shows up out of the blue, bringing Peter to the safety of Nowhere, where he's quickly revived. Everything is fine. Everybody's alright, and a massive group hug of every single main character gathers around Peter. The movie then wraps up with Gamora heading off with the Ravagers once again, Mantis heading off to have some time to herself, and Quill deciding to take a break from his Guardian's life to catch up with his grandfather back on Earth. This leaves the role of leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy fairly open. But Quill decides to bequeath it to Rocket, thus bringing to a close James Gunn's almost decade-spanning trilogy. And that pretty much was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So, now the plot summary has been taken care of, all approximately half an hour of it, allow me to talk about my opinions. Yes, I know, scary on the internet. So, it goes without saying that I love this film. I've enjoyed watching the Guardians of the Galaxy for years. I don't think I've seen any other Marvel movie more than the first Guardians film. And this movie caps off the whole series in a beautiful way. The lore behind Rocket is extremely well crafted and heart-wrenching. The characters, for the most part, are given equal amounts of screen time and act completely consistently with what we know of them. The comedy, even after being incredibly overdone and misunderstood in every other Marvel film, still manages to stay hilarious in a way that only the Guardians can. And don't even get me started about the villain of this film. The High Evolutionary is, in my opinion, Marvel's greatest villain since Thanos. I simply cannot do him justice in this video. You just have to see him. And if you're watching this after already seeing the film, then you know how good he is in this. I have no idea why Marvel is trying to set up, like, this Kang fellow in the Ant-Man universe when the High Evolutionary is right here. This threatening, yet simple character. It's just that sort of bad guy that you just love to hate. And when he finally gets his comeuppances, it feels amazing. He's not complex or sympathetic like Thanos. He's just a dickhead who tortures the cutest little innocent animals and genocides a planet populated by mostly innocent people. I think that's why it was important to show that scene with the family, to sort of build up that human side between them, because if we just glanced them and then had them eliminated, it wouldn't have made their death so impactful. But knowing that all of these were conscious people living lives not too dissimilar from our own, it really hits hard. And just because a few of the populace were less than perfect, they all deserve to die for some reason. Which brings me neatly along to the next point of focus, the movie's messages. When watching Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, in between all the jokes and action scenes, there are some really deep, hard-hitting moral questions brought up. Like, is creating a perfect society impossible? And if true, is it the fault of people, or is it society that's the problem? Another thing that this movie brings up is animal abuse, with the adorable animals being mutilated by the High Evolutionary being a brilliant visual parallel to what happens in animals in scientific, medical, and cosmetic tests. The Evolutionary himself embodying the heartless individuals who carry out these tests on creatures that don't want these things to happen to them, but can't do anything about it. They can only stare out of cages blankly and question why. And the ones that do try to escape are usually just destroyed. The choice on James Gunn's part to bring out some of the most internationally beloved animals and then just torturing them just to reach a new stage in an ultimately impossible task. It's a perfect allegory and a brilliant way of making the villain so hateable. However, this movie isn't perfect. It's damn good, as the title and thumbnail says, but it isn't perfect. As you may have noticed, I mentioned earlier that not all the characters were well balanced throughout the film. The most glaring example of which being Adam Warlock. The guy feels like he was almost edited into the film at the last moment, and you could easily forget that he was even in the film. He has about 2 memorable scenes, and around 6 more that you could watch 10 times over and still forget they exist. There's also a few problems with the tone. Now, I've already complimented this film on its more mature and darker themes, but sometimes it can be a little jarring to jump from sci-fi animal torture to slapstick comedy in the very next scene. But overall, this didn't affect my own viewing too much, so I hope it doesn't affect yours. And one final gripe I have with the film is just a small little nitpick, but it still took me out of the film completely. When the gang goes to the giant space tumor, the costumes worn by the bad guys are very obviously just big dumb rubber suits, making it look less like a modern Marvel production and more like an episode of Doctor Who from the 1980s. But other than these few gripes, I really like this film, and could honestly ramble on for ages more about how well Star-Lord and Gamora's relationship is handled, and how the MacGuffin plot works honestly really naturally in comparison with a bunch of others, and of course talk heaps more about how great Perturabo was. So yeah, go watch Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I can't recommend it enough, dude. This movie was honestly just... I cannot... I'm going off script for this bit. I just want to quickly ramble before we wrap things up. Like, dude, watching this film was just an incredible experience. Just seeing everything wrap up in this incredible way, seeing all these characters for what definitely feels like the last time, and just seeing it be such a good movie in the face of all Disney's recent, slop, and Marvel in general. It just feels nice that we finally have something that we can all just enjoy. And, you know, there will be some critics out there who'll say things like, oh no, this is bad Marvel all the same, but, like, I definitely want to shift my content to just mostly focus on positive stuff. There will be some slightly more negative viewed stuff to one side of my content, because, like, negatives, I've seen on YouTube negatives get views, but, like, hey, be positive, enjoy stuff. So yeah, please go see Guardians 3. It's probably out on DVD by now. It's probably only giving like 10 quid, so yeah. Splash out, you will enjoy the movie. The soundtrack is amazing, the characters are great, you'll have a good laugh with it. If you've enjoyed Guardians, then it's definitely the sort of movie for you. If you want something that harkens back to an older age of Marvel, then I cannot recommend it enough. And, you know, watch it just for the High Evolutionary. He is so good. He's such a brilliant villain. Like, Kang-Hu, the High Evolutionary, Perturaba, whatever, he is just... God. I cannot... He has the same sort of vibe as, like, Jack Horner from the new Puss in Boots movie. Like, you don't need a villain to be complex to be good. You just have to make them hateably likable, or likably hateable, whichever way. Just... God, top 10 Marvel villains, top 5. He's brilliant, dude. Anyway, outro time. Outro! Thank you everyone for watching. If you enjoyed this and want to see more like it, then please like this video, subscribe to the channel, as watching that number go up really helps me to ride out the depression that seeing this video get inevitably copyright struck by Disney will eventually bring. Also, here's some other stuff that I would like you to do. Subscribe to my second YouTube channel, where I post infrequently in between my awful upload schedule. Join my Discord server for epic gamer chats and the daily cursed image caption, now in its hundreds of days. Follow me on Twitch, where I stream games and stuff, and the links to all this stuff is in the description below. So, thank you everyone for watching. I have been the Invisible Cactus. Chimichanga. Hello? Yes, this is the post-video cactus. What you are about to hear is a compilation of the times I burped during this recording. So I hope you're ready to enjoy some very gross sounds with cactus. Alright. Have a good one, chat. Why? I don't usually burp this much.